Welcome everyone to the Ask Me Anything Top Analytics Trends panel. Very pleased to have everyone join us today. We are going to have an interactive session. We look forward to responding to all your questions while we talk through the trends with you and with this panel. My name is Helene Snelting. I'm the Data Science Director for TIBCO. I manage the data science team in Europe and in APJ, and I've been with TIBCO for more than 8 years. And I look forward to introducing you to Neil and Colin and Michael. Neil, if you can maybe start introducing yourself.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name's Neil Kanungo. I am Dr. Spotfire at TIBCO. I host a regular Spotfire enablement sessions and live sessions at TIBCO. I work with Michael and Colin on the data science team. I've been with TIBCO for over 5 years now, and excited to join you all today.
Colin.
Yep. Hey, Colin Gray. I'm Senior Lead Data Scientist in the data science team as well. Been with TIBCO for 3.5 years and really focused on working with a lot of customers, working across a lot of industries, which has been a really good experience to see trends and what's happening, and probably more of the challenges that people face across the business and how they actually deploy data science, etc. So that's what I hope to sort of give over some of those thoughts and experiences today.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Colin. It's Michael O'Connell here. I run the data science team and a number of other things at TIBCO. We're excited to be here following up with you all. And we're going to take you through a bit of a few topics. So, Neil, if you can stop sharing, I'll just want to kick things off here with some of those topics. So here we go. And it's really terrific to have the hands-on context that Neil brings through Dr. Spotfire and that Colin brings through all his work in the field. So the topics today, there's a certain tension between data management and analytics, respecting data privacy and getting the most out of the data. There's also a certain tension in building the most accurate model that you can, but having that model be explainable. And then there's, ethical considerations and keeping the human in the driver's seat with this whole topic of human-centered AI. Now, these were all topics that we covered in our recent TIBCO Analytics Forum, and Elaine's going to give you a bit of a tour of the new community site that shows that. So I think maybe, Elaine, why don't you do that now, and then I'll kick off the first topic. So let me stop sharing and have you give a bit of a preview to the new TIBCO community, the summary of our analytics forum, recent analytics forum event, setting context for these 3 topics, and then we'll get into the hands-on folks on this call explaining their experiences in these areas. But let's have a look at the community site that we've just launched, and to give a little context to today's presentation. Thanks, Elaine.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, part of what our team does is sharing our knowledge as much as possible with all of you in the TIBCO community, and with us, many colleagues at TIBCO and partners, and you as well are sharing things on the TIBCO community. And we recently moved to a new platform. So the content that you're used to is still there, but in a slightly different format and in an updated format and with really good interactivity. So some new aspects to the community are that you can see all of these events. So, for example, at the moment we're actually running 2 very popular sessions in general or in parallel. Dr. Spotfire is on as well. So you can easily sort of see the things that are going on with direct links to registration for the events. You can ask questions on all our topics. We've got our team actually continuously sort of monitoring these questions and answering them. This doesn't replace TIBCO support, but it's a great way to engage with us. And we've got enablement hubs for the different products and also industries that are really interesting and are continuously updated. We've got our exchange where you can download all the product extensions and solutions that we're talking about in our webinars and today as well. And then also in the articles is where we share all our content, and one of those pages is the TIBCO Analytics Forum. And all of you have received an invite because you were directly or indirectly associated with the TIBCO Analytics Forum this year. And we wanted to reflect a little bit on the topics that we've discussed there with human-centered AI and the topics that Michael just teed up. So all of the sessions from the TIBCO Analytics Forum are available to you on this site and have been available since the live site went down. So we've made sure that all this content is there for you. And we'll look into a bit of the detail of those during the session, and I'll be posting links to the topics that we talk about during the session in the chat as well for you as a reference. So with that, Michael, I think I'll hand back to you to start with the first topic.
Perfect. Yes, thanks for the context there, Elaine. And we'll, like Elaine said, we'll be providing a bunch of links for you to navigate the new community in the context of today's topics. So let's get started with the first topic, data management analytics, and we'll come back to model accuracy, explainability, and human-centered AI. But this first topic, it's folks are talking about how you've got to protect your data, protect privacy, security, governance, but you also got to leverage the data. So there's a bit of a rub there, a bit of a tension. And, we've been feeling that basically expand out the data science lifecycle for all the way from project definition and acquisition of data and blending, and the whole issue of privacy, governance, security, and setting up a project with a set of data, a view, data as a product, a data mesh. These are some of the terms, governance around the virtual views of the data for an individual project, that whole front end of managing data going into a data science and effort, where then you get into the feature generation, model refinement, testing, deployment, and monitoring. This whole life cycle has come into focus. And I know, Colin, you've been working on a number of things, but one of the topics that I've been most quite excited about in your work has been in the insurance industry, self-service for dynamic pricing. And I wondered if you could give us a little context there on, how you've approached that sort of end-to-end of, wanting to understand the data that goes into the model, but then also, understanding the model and getting it deployed. So let's start off with Colin, and then we'll have Neil give some context from the Dr. Spotfire angle.
Yeah, absolutely. So the interesting part is you're covering so many steps along the way. And like you say, you're going right from data preparation right through to model deployment. And one of the crucial things is complementing, the actual human expertise and domain knowledge at every step, and making sure that's part of the analytics and data science process, but also safeguarding what you're doing. So you need to make sure that the way you retrieve data, bring it into, your analytics is done in the right manner. Is it exposing things that should not be? We have, people are protected for privacy, for certain laws. So you need to make sure you bring data in a very safe manner to prevent mistakes in the process, because if you let it filter through the process and be published, then of course it can cause a lot of problems. And then it's a very stepwise thing that I've experienced is you need to break it down into logical steps where you're doing analysis and preparation that teaches you about the data, and also you can challenge with your domain expertise. But then you want to bring in data science to infuse into that so that it can tell you information that might help you. What are the important features? Insurance, what are the reasons people take up a policy, or what are the reasons they claim against the policy, and how can you optimize that to give them the best product or increase your sort of consumer renewals, for instance. But once you build a model, one of the things I've seen a lot in industry is people overuse, say, metrics for model performance. They look at an RMSE or an R-square or some single score that says this model is quite good or maybe not so good. But that never tells you the story. And so you really need to delve into that. And that's, again, combining data science with analytics, with domain knowledge, where you can use things like explainability and actually delve into even individual predictions and say, why is that person's policy being predicted to not renew or to be renewed? And that's where you get this really interesting story. You start to find lots of stories that the model's telling that you don't get from just looking at sort of the standard model evaluation metrics. And that, my experience, has completely changed the model you would pick and deploy. And I've seen that in different examples. I've seen it in F1, I've seen it in insurance, I've seen it in demand forecasting, that changed the decision of model you would deploy by going into the real nitty-gritty behind that and analyzing.
Well, you're getting into the second topic now, Colin. So let's get into your first bit of it. And that bit that got my attention in your narrative was hands-on exploring the data as a precursor to creating any features or building any models. And maybe you could show a little bit of how you've approached that, especially when you've got really big data that you want to explore in memory in an interactive way.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just share my screen briefly. So that's my F1 demo, but so yeah, this is an example of doing a pricing model. You can just see just how many tabs and steps we have. It's a very stepwise process. But once we're in the data exploration and data, we actually have massive millions of rows of data. And one of the things we want to do here is we're just looking at the raw data for this insurance model building and how much renewals versus non-renewals. But downsampling is really important, so we can actually push that out to back into the database and say we only want 60% downsample, and then actually create a much smaller downsample of the data. That's crucial because you can't, when you're exploring, you don't want to explore with 15 million, 20 million. It can't handle it in memory. So we can do things like downsample, which gives you representation, and that can alert you to different things. But the real interesting part comes when you go into exploration, where you can actually drill through all the different components, looking at what's categorical. So starting to think about data science, breaking it into categorical and numerical, and how you treat those different variables. And we can start looking at distributions, so bringing in statistics, looking at overall distributions and averages versus non-renewals and renewals. So you're constantly building up that knowledge in an interactive way. But that's where you want
on these graphs, Colin, the blue
Yeah.
is people who accepted and the gray is people that didn't accept. Is that right?
Yeah.
So you're exploring the data with the numerical and categorical variables, but you're keeping in mind, got your eye on the prize here as to what is affecting someone's propensity to accept a new policy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I would always say is, and sometimes actually businesses miss this, is keeping your focus on the business aim. The business aim is, in this case, is trying to predict or understand renewals and non-renewals. So here we have, like you say, the non-renewals in grey and the renewals in blue. So we can actually go through the different parameters and say, well, is there a difference in distribution of a certain parameter or certain data we have? So for instance, here we can see certain car types, for whatever reason, have tended to be more led to more renewals. And we represent the data in two different ways. This is like a standard bar chart where we've stacked them, but this is 100% stacked, which just allows us to see, for instance, in this convertible range, it's hard to see the split, but using stacked, we can see and compare the split of non-renewals to renewals. So it's important to combine lots of visuals to tell the story, because one visual won't give you that information.
And so the hatchback, Colin, looks like it's got a better renewal rate there.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's probably not why people renew, but maybe there's something behind that. Maybe your pricing is related to the car type. Maybe the value of those vehicles leads to different policy renewals or different insurance premiums that attract certain renewals. So I think that's where you can delve into more and more stories by sort of drilling down through each sort of parameter. We can even see here a vehicle value on the bottom, where you can see that vehicle value, there's a lower higher vehicle value tends to end up with no renewals. So is that because more expensive, higher premiums? So hatchbacks are smaller cars, maybe they're cheaper, so you get more renewals. So you already start this story just by doing some sort of quick analysis.
No, exactly. So Neil, how are your experiences with this notion of end-to-end data science, starting exploring data and then getting a model all the way into operations? How is your and Colin, if you can, I guess, stop sharing your screen there for a minute. But Neil, this idea of going all the way to getting a model through that whole data process and actually getting it out, into production and taking action on it. That notion of end to end, how are you seeing that show up in Dr. Spotfire?
Yeah, Dr. Spotfire is great for us to actually directly see the trends and what data analytics practitioners are seeking today. And what we've seen is a high popularity in topics. One that's airing today is ARIA NLG, so natural language generation, to enhance the explanations and the interpretations of the data science that's on the screen, that's on the visual analytics app that you're using. Natural language generation can really improve that interpretability and that operational efficiency for insights And then next from there, we've seen a lot with model ops. That's been another popular session. So we know that people are trying to figure out, how do I manage my different models? How do I take my models out of my model development platform, whether that be Spotfire or Team Studio or any other tool, and how do I actually manage these in production? How do I monitor these for drift? And how can I continue to use different models in production and in development. And then thirdly, we've seen a lot of popularity with cloud action. So once you have those insights from your end-to-end side, how do you actually take action from that data and those insights? And cloud actions has been another popular session where people are able to, just with a click of a button, start to write back to a CRM or take action in Snowflake or Adobe Sign and sign documents, or Google Cloud and Google Drive, and create new documents with Google Docs. So actually going into other business processes from the analytics, visual analytics apps, and the analytics end-to-end workflow has been another popular trend we've seen.
So is there a, where do people access those recordings, Neil, of the popular Dr. Spotfire sessions? So can you show some folks where to
Yeah,
get a hold of
absolutely.
those?
Yeah, so with Dr. Spotfire, we have a live session the first Tuesday of each month, and those are all recorded and posted on YouTube. So you can actually see the cloud action session, the model ops session, and then shortly later today, the ARIA NLG session will be posted as well. But these are all the live sessions, and then you can also go to the YouTube channel, the Spotfire YouTube channel. Let me go right here to the Spotfire YouTube channel, and you'll see the live sessions and the what's new in Spotfire and the Dr. Spotfire content, the enablement content with weekly tips that are coming out.
Oh, that's terrific. So yeah, I think let's move along. I think that's a really nice summary of that tension between leveraging your data and respecting its privacy. But the second tension I think we want to cover today is this notion of how do we build a very accurate model to describe, in this case of the example Colin put up earlier, what are the factors that affect someone's propensity to renew their insurance policy. But once we have now built that model from the best available data and safe data, how do we then explain it in a way that people can understand? Not only are what are the factors that affect renewal across the population, but what about a certain person who either, in this case, is deciding whether to renew, but in other use cases might be getting given a loan, but you want to understand and explain at a personal level as well as a model level. So Colin, this whole area of explainability and this tension with model accuracy and the desire to understand at the population and personal level of what's going on. Can you give us some pointers on that? I know there's some real interesting analyses that have come out of the explainability world, but can you go through and sort of show at both the population and personal level how that plays out?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just share my example again.
And I had a screenshot up there on one of the popular explainability methods, the SHAP method.
Yeah,
that's maybe a good place to start, Colin.
Yeah, absolutely. The two most classic ones are SHAP and Lime. Lime, I find not as easy to use as SHAP. I think the explanations from SHAP are better in terms of that they're more relatable to the data you put into the model, and they're easier to understand. So that's one of my sort of personal experiences so far as using that. But it does bring your models into a whole new light. Model evaluation, as I mentioned, is just lots of metrics and things, like we've got different confusing matrices and accuracies here, but to understand a model and what it's doing or how it's thinking, you need to delve into the individual level. And what we have here is all the probabilities of predictions of whether someone will renew. So one mean the model thinks 100% confident they'll renew, right down to very low chance of renewal. And then we've got the accuracy of whether we got it right or not. But the important thing here is I can select, say, all the predictions that were around 70% probability of renewal according to the model. And we can do this for multiple models. So it's interesting that this isn't just explaining one model, because you build multiple models, so you can compare how each model thinks, and that one might hit home to you that that's a more logical way from your domain knowledge. But what we have end up here is that on the right is, this is really a key chart. You have each of your features ranked of what's the most important influencer of your model. So invite premium is the most important influencer, down to things like no claims discount types. But the one thing I'd advise about explainability is it's really powerful, but it does take some thought to actually understand. So arrows going to the left say they lower the probability of the renewal. So this is lowering, or to the right, it means it increases the probability of renewal in this model. But we've got a color as well to add in there. So there's a third dimension. And what that is saying is this value tends to be higher or lower than other premiums that you're comparing it to. So what this is saying is that the pink is higher values. So what's saying is a higher invite premium compared to all the other invite premiums we're analyzing leads to lower probabilities of renewal. So that seems quite logical. And what we can do is say highlight these two extremes. We can see here, this is the individual policies and the sharp values for each of those policies. So now we can see vehicle value, as I mentioned before, has played a prominent role in reducing the probability of renewal. But we have some positive influences as well. But you can see it's quite different to this person's policy, where actually years with incumbent has increased the probability of renewal. So you get this really nice example where you can sort of drill into different individuals. And here we can see the actual individual data. So for instance, why this is good is if you've got something that's categorical, so vehicle type, where you might, something that's higher or lower in terms of blue or pink might not make sense, but the model's converted it to a number. But now I can actually relate that back to data. I can see these are the vehicle types that increase the likelihood of a non-renewal, the estates, the SUVs. And if I go into the pink ones over here that increase your probability somebody renews, it's hatchbacks like we saw before. So we can do this across the board and look at lots of different features, and we can even compare different individual policies and what makes up these probabilities. And this not only gives you confidence in the model or makes you question the model's logic, but also teaches you about your own data, because the model's finding these patterns, and it will actually help you learn and see possible biases you have in your data, or possible issues you have in your data, or how the model's been set up. So I think that's really key to do this. And you can spend, as a data scientist, I can spend a lot of time looking at this, because it's really fascinating to see how the model has output different probabilities.
Colin, this is really good. Thanks for showing this. There's a question actually in the Q&A. Thanks, Fabian, for posting. The question is, does the dashboard for model evaluation and explainability come automatically for every model, or is it custom built? And how many models are available?
So yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, the strength of using Spotfire and the TIBCO data science suite is you can add as many models as you like in all the different methods. So what we've done is we've built these using things like Python or using things like TIBCO data science when we're working through big data. So really it's as many models as you want to put in. So for instance, here we've got 3 different models, but in each case, we're using those through Python or we're using those through TIBCO data science. And again, we've used different metrics and built these custom interfaces to view that. However, we have published some of these on our exchange as well, example templates to help you get started. But these are sort of my customization for this insurance example, because in data science, my experience is even within the same industry or even within the same department or use cases in the same industry, there's subtly different needs. So you often will need to customize it. And that's why I find building up your own interface, maybe from a starting template is really useful.
I think the drill downs are especially helpful, and you get away from just having too much of a predefined dashboard. You're able to actually change the way the visualizations are displayed and see that evolve with how your model is developing.
Yeah, that's really key, because actually how to visualize this bottom chart and this left chart here, it took me quite a few iterations. I had different charts. I didn't have this table. This was a waterfall chart at first. I changed it to a bar. This wasn't the same. So it does take experimenting. Actually, so it's an interesting point that even picking the right visuals for your model and your data is really important, as well as understanding the models themselves.
No, that's great. And Neil, have we done Dr. Spotfire sessions on explainability yet?
We've done it on model evaluation and a little bit with explainability, but we certainly have some more sessions planned where we're going to go deeper into explainability
Okay,
with
great,
SHAP
great.
in mind. Yeah,
And I know, Helene, with our quarterly TIBCO Analytics meetup, we covered this at the last session, right? I mean, that's something that another link that we can send around to the folks asking questions, I think.
That's right. Yes, I will post a link to the TIBCO Analytics meetup where we cover all of the latest things that we publish on the exchange. So I'll put that in as well. I'm just posting the specific item on explainability that's available for download on the exchange right now.
Right, right. And yeah, really interesting, Colin, and important to be able to get to the individual person in this case. And the understanding what happened with that person on the SHAP analysis, right?
Yeah, and so for instance, while we were talking there, I actually highlighted some of the bottom bars here at the lowest probability. And if you remember, the previous chart looked quite different here. We've got quite extremes of why these people will never renew. And again, it tells a different story, and you can click on one person's policy and see everything about them and what pushed them towards not renewal. So yeah, that interactivity is really key.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's where Spotfire really shines. And I see a question in the example there about with Spotfire and TIBCO data science. And so, yeah, so Spotfire, we can do a lot of, all these analyses Colin's showing, we can do them on in memory on smaller data sets, but a lot of these data are big. And that's where TIBCO data science comes in to be able to, scale out the models to run in database or in file system or, at scale. And then pull back the results set into Spotfire for more of this interactive exploration. So that combination of interactive exploration in Spotfire and big data, machine learning in Team Studio, data science, TIBCO data science is important. And then being able to deploy the model into operations is the kind of the other big thing. So if you let me just share to wrap up here, Colin, on this topic. And I know we're covering a lot of territory today, guys, but that is that last bit of, what Colin basically showed here. Let me recap a little bit just to kind of put a bow on it. But Colin showed this interactive explainability, which is so crucial from inside of Spotfire. He also mentioned how we can downsample in creative ways that respect the data structure from TIBCO data science into Spotfire to do the interactive exploration, and then going back out to the data science product to run the full data set on millions or hundreds of millions of rows, and then publish back the result set, which is quite small, back for interactive analysis in Spotfire, and then taking that model out into production. And Neil mentioned with model ops and managing the model through Spotfire to then apply real-time data to have continuous analytics. So that end-to-end life cycle is really what we're aspiring to and bringing our products together to achieve. Okay, so look, the third topic is another tension here about private data privacy, but also keeping the human in the loop as we go to deploying models. So this whole topic of human-centered AI, we featured this at our last TIBCO Analytics Forum. We had Ben Schneiderman speak, and Ben has a new book out this year on TIBCO-centered AI, which is a great read. I recommend it. But also, I follow this Google group, Human-Centered AI, that Ben puts out a note. Every week there's an update of what's what are some of the latest issues. So if I cut across and take a look at that, this week's edition of that, I can bring that up here and see that this week, Ben's talking about the European AI Act that's in draft form, and pointing particularly to this chapter on requirements for high-risk AI systems, and a number of other things that are happening this week here. This group issued a new statement on principles for responsible algorithmic systems. Other articles that have come out this week. This is such an active area that, this is the sort of a companion to Ben's book about what's happening at the moment. So I do find this, for a quick read every week, I think it's really fascinating how much is going on in different industries. And, the FDA's adverse event reporting system, for example, on the AI incident database. These are two important databases that are maintained, and getting back to that personal effect of systems on people. So I will, highly recommend those, and we can send you out links to those too. So that was our third topic, human-centered AI, and Helene, I think we could, we have Ben's presentation from our analytics forum on our community site, as well, that we can point people to. But I know today's session, we wanted to cover some of those tensions between data management, analytics, the full data lifecycle in building a model, but more importantly, exploring the data and getting the right data in at the beginning. Then how to interpret accuracy, or how to do explainability on models to get the most accurate model, but also to be able to explain its effects on the population, but also on individuals. And then this whole area of human-centered AI. So bit of a whirlwind, but I think, a lot of resources we wanted to put in front of you. And I think I'll turn it back to Helene to see if we've got any questions or to kind of wrap it up.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, indeed, a whirlwind. It was good to talk about some of the trends and how they've evolved since we saw each other at TAF. And I know you're going to continue to look at trends and make your predictions for 2023 as well. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the next session as well, and look a little bit about, what's ahead of us as these topics continue as well. So I'd like to thank Colin and Neil and you, Michael, for the discussion, and everyone who joined us today, and for your questions in the chat to us. We'll respond to each of you individually, and we'll be following up with an email that has all the links that we've shared in the chat today as well. So thanks for attending, and we'll see you in the next session.
Perfect. Hey, great to get your perspectives, Neil and Colin, and I look forward to talking to our folks who joined today in more ways than one. Thanks, Elaine.